They were just multi-levels with all these small graves everywhere. And I was following one, and even the floor and the boards around the bottom of the floor had energy. Everything emanated power.
I sat down with Mario Woods, a former U.S. Air Force security responder. In 1977, he was stationed at Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. Then, age 23, he experienced an incident that would change him forever, literally leaving him with missing time, marks on his body, and a colleague locked in catatonic shock for hours.
Okay, so you're in Ellsworth Air Force Base. It's 1977. You have a partner that you're working with?
Yeah,
Is that
his
right?
name, Michael Johnson. He's a real light-skinned black guy. He told me he was from Chicago, Illinois. Mm-hmm. And we only worked together that one day. He was working vacation relief for my partner, whose name was Steve Welchel. I guess it was about 9 o'clock, 9:15 or so. And I just walked outside, and you're talking prairie land as far as you can see north and east and west, and you don't see south because the building's behind you. And I see this light off to my east. It looks like a mini moon. I honestly thought it was the landing lights or some type of landing lights for B-52 bombers, because the main base supported aircraft of B-52s.
Long story short, an hour later, he and his partner, two-man security alert team partner, are called. Suddenly there's an alert because some kind of intrusion at one of the missile sites is going on. And they didn't know what that was all about. Well, he and his partner drove to that site.
And as we turned left, there sat this object on top of November 5 that was about 10 feet in the air, directly on top of that blast door, that was the size of a Walmart building.
They're freaking out. They didn't even get to radio to base to tell them what they saw. And all of a sudden, according to Mario, he and his partner, suddenly it was like all the air in the crew cab was sucked out and they were suffocating. They both suddenly started, gasping for air.
Literally could not get a breath of air. Now, I don't know if that was from my excitement. I don't know if it's from adrenaline. I'm 23 years old. I was in excellent shape. I feel something on my right side. And I turn my head and I see these 4, I'm going to call them beings. And they are not walking as you and I walk. They are just gliding across the ground. Maybe, I don't know how high off the ground. I couldn't really see that. But they have these little uniforms on. And the one on the far right, he had some type of a small wand in his waist belt. I've got a drawing of it that had a yellow tip on it, some type of a yellow tip. But the one behind him was a chest and a head taller than the little guys. And he had this thing on his chest right here that pulsated the same color as what was on that little wand. And when I saw him, then I was afraid. Then I felt fear. And then I went black. I just went, that's the last thing that I saw in my mind.
And then the next thing he knew, and it seemed like the next minute, he was somewhere that he didn't really recognize, and somebody from base was calling on the radio saying, "Where are you? Where are you?" What turned out to be the case was he, his partner, and the truck had been transported roughly 5 miles to a reservoir near a little town of Newell, South Dakota.
Maybe 20 minutes passed. So this backup alert team came, and I said, I don't know where I am. I don't know where we are. So I kept trying to communicate with Michael Johnson. He wouldn't answer me in any way. He was just frozen in this position, looking straight ahead. I even tried pulling his hand off that steering wheel, and he was just, I don't know how a person can stay that tense and for so long that they don't cramp up. I would cramp up doing that, but he did.
Even though it was terribly cold at night, I mean, just ice cold, frigid, he stepped out on the ground and sunk in wet mud. So somehow the mud had been heated up right around the truck, and he was standing, you know, like ankle deep in wet mud on a sub-zero winter night.
Did Michael Johnson ever make it out of his catatonic state, your partner?
No, not while we were there. When Sergeant Garza pulled up, he pulled up within, say, 60 feet. I said, "Hey, Sergeant Garza, how's it going?" I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Mario, I can't talk to you about this." He said, "I'm just here to escort you back to November Control."
So they lead him back to base. He's debriefed basically by, I think, the squadron commander and someone who turned out to be an OSI agent. He's taken to the base hospital and examined. He finds, I think it was on his forehead and his ankle, there was a circular wound or depression of some kind with a little dimple in the center.
Do you still have the marks at all?
Yeah.
Can I see them?
Sure. Had these socks on, squeezing the blood up.
Wow,
if you can
wow.
see it.
Wow. Yeah, those look, I mean, just like perfectly vertically aligned, but like so clearly not like a spider, but like way too big for that.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Yeah. They just kept asking questions, and I got to the point where it was just, everything was just at one time coming from every space in my mind, questions about the whole deal. And I said, "Hey," I said, "I got to go to the restroom." And I just went and sat on the toilet. And all of a sudden, Jesse, I get this ringing in my ears that was as if somebody struck a Liberty Bell right next to my head. I mean, really, I have to emphasize that because it was like, it got my attention. But when it happened, everything turned like lime green to me, like pea green. I closed my eyes, and when I did, I had this feeling I was leaving my body. Literally, I thought I was dying. I said, "I guess this is how you die." So they left, or were leaving, and I opened up the stall door, and I just went to the sink. And mind you, I still have on my long johns and my fatigue pants and shirt, and just drowning myself with water. I was just soaking wet. Because Master Sergeant Gray said something to me as I came out there. He said, "What'd you do, climb in the sink?" or something like that. And I did. I don't even know if I answered. I just said, "Yes, sir." So I grabbed my stuff, and immediately I said, "Well, what about Michael Johnson?" He said, "Don't worry about him. He'll be going with Sergeant Hawkins." I said, "Okay." And I really wanted to talk to him, but immediately upon arrival at that site, we were separated right then and there. Now, I don't know what good it would have done because he wasn't coherent or wasn't answering anything anyway.
So he hadn't said a word.
Nothing. Not one word that I knew of. Not one word. He hadn't said anything to me or to anybody else that was there. Every time I asked about Michael Johnson, they kept telling me, "Don't worry about Michael Johnson. He's fine. He's fine." Really bothered me.
Yeah.
It
almost sounds like they're covering for something.
Yeah, don't worry about Michael Johnson. He is fine. Off we went to Ellsworth, and it was about an hour, 10-minute ride back to Ellsworth. Went to Ralph E. Spraker's office under escort, and I remember him saying, "Sounds as if you've had an interesting evening or night or something like that." And I said, "Yes, sir." And I looked to my left, and there's a total of 5 people in that room. There's the deputy base commander, who I don't remember his name, but next to him was a man in a gray tweed suit with a hat, and the hat was under his arm. Then there was a Captain Jack Reed, OSI. Next to him was this new OSI guy named Rick Doty.
Interesting.
Yeah, because the first time I saw him was on Ancient Aliens, and I said, "I know that guy. He was at my debrief."
I was a counterintelligence officer for the Air Force Office of Special Investigation.
I was personally fascinated by the fact that Richard Doty had been involved in the aftermath of Mario's case. I knew about Doty because of a great book called Project Beta by Greg Bishop. Doty was an Air Force counterintelligence agent, basically tasked with performing a psychological operation on an innocent researcher named Paul Benowitz, who had seen an exotic craft at Kirtland Air Force Base. Doty convinced Benowitz that he was in touch with aliens, even receiving signals on his computer. This eventually drove Benowitz into psychiatric hospitalization. So the fact that Doty was part of Mario's debrief is fascinating, seems very important, and requires follow-up by some brave souls.
And up to that point, I had nobody.
Yeah.
I'd had nobody that could say, "Yeah, they were there," or what have you. I tried running down my old flight chief and assistant flight chief, but with no success, or anybody else. And especially Michael Johnson. Some money has been spent trying to locate Michael Johnson. We've looked in hospitals. We've looked in...
Can't find him anywhere.
No, sir. And I reported at the Arrow in March of 23, I think, when I spoke with them.
Did Arrow follow up at all?
I don't know. They never got back with me. And 4 hours and 19 minutes, I spoke with them.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and they said I would get a copy of everything which had been, talked about.
Can you contact Michael Johnson's family?
I don't have any way. I don't have any numbers or anything. He said he was from Chicago, Illinois. Believe me, every resource, including other law enforcement officers that I know, today's technology, have not located him yet. Neither has Arrow.
So what was your interaction with Doty?
You mean in the email?
Initially. No, when you first meet him, he's in
That
this room
day?
full of 5 people, yeah.
Nothing. Not one thing. We'd ever spoke or anything like that. He was directly reporting to Captain Jack Reed next to him.
So that's fascinating, right? That this guy, who's clearly this disinfo agent, at least in the context of Benowitz, and you don't know why.
He was brand new. He was brand new then. So as a person that's very high in this whole thing said, those were the days that when he was probably, honestly, not changed in any way, perhaps. I just want to say that the right way, because I email him once in a while, and he'll answer me back. Whereas it took me about 5 years to get him to even do that, and then we got to be on a cast together.
So real quick, just context. He now has come out saying he's reformed and he apologizes for, his malpractice in the past. A lot of people are suspicious of that reform. It does feel a little bit sometimes to me like he's flooding the zone with this info. Like he'll talk about, 6 alien races.
This crystal rectangle came from an actual alien craft.
And it just seems extremely speculative and not based on any sort of evidence.
Correct.
It's very weird.
Yeah, it's more than I know how to swallow. I only know that what I witnessed is my incident.
So how many were there? Okay.
A gentleman named Jared Tarbell, who is my benefactor, he supported my research. He paid to have Mario regress a regression hypnosis session. In the video of the session where Mario is being regressed back to that night, he becomes utterly terrified. I've never seen anybody reliving an abduction experience.
In a very low head.
They look like grays. They look like the small grays, but the one behind them, I guess you would classify him as a tall gray. On Whitley Strieber's book, Communion, of course, the first time I saw that picture, I froze in my stride, and I had to have that book. And at Barnes and Noble, or wherever it was at the time when it came out, and I literally, before I opened the first page, I literally just sat and stared at that picture for many hours before I ever even read his book.
What was the craft like? So you're in the inside of this thing. What did it look like?
A beehive.
Beehive?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, there were, from my looking around as I did in that playground, like I always try to take a mental picture of something, they were just multi-levels with all these small grays everywhere, going to and fro and doing whatever they were doing. I just got to look for a moment, and I was following one, and even the floor and the boards around the bottom of the floor had energy. Everything emanated power in some way. The walls.
Was there humming associated?
Not that I can remember.
And it almost felt like the tall gray was maybe in charge of these smaller grays.
Absolutely. In that room. Another thing, too, I was not on a table. I was, from my memory, I was on some type of I was like wrapped in a triangular kind of beam or something that was body length, about 4 foot in the air. And as like a strange light would, not a strange light, It's even hard to describe, but it was as if I was inserted in something that was some type of a force field or some kind of a holding field that they could move you around in, like a gurney without wheels, a table without a back or wheels or legs attached to it. And I felt as if, when they reached in, or when he lifted my arm up, lifted me up right here on my wrist, it exited that pyramidal field or whatever it was above me, and it was in his atmosphere at that time.
If you had kind of a best guess, do you think they had positive intentions or negative, or?
I think they had positive.
What do you
but
think?
they fulfill their mission, whatever that mission is, whether it's to obtain DNA material or what have you, or some kind of a programming, or I don't know, whatever they want to do, they're going to do.
Outside of like the obvious, which is you experienced this kind of crazy paranormal disruption in your life, was this an inflection point, or did it change your life in a dramatic way afterwards?
Oh, it did.
How so?
I had to find out everything about archaeology and pyramids.
And so that was just something that it almost felt like it was installed inside of you or downloaded.
Yes.
And why?
Still today.
Why do you think you became so interested in that?
I have no idea.